Good day, everyone. For today's discussion, we will tackle about Watson and Skinner's perspectives on behaviorism. Every teacher knows that they will have a student in class who is difficult to manage and work with. Their behavior is hard to control, and it can get extra work to get them pay attention and stop distracting others. If you're studying to become a teacher just like me, you have to learn classroom management techniques that will prepare you for difficult students. Additionally, it's extremely valuable to learn about learning theories and recognize that there are different methods and thoughts about how people learn and behave. So as we go along with this discussion, we will tackle more about the behaviorism and the perspectives from the two different psychologists, John B. Watson and B.F. Skinner. Behaviorism, or the behavioral learning theory, is a popular concept that focuses on how students learn. It focuses on the idea that all behaviors are learned through interaction with the environment, and says that innate or inherited factors have a very little influence on behavior. Behaviorism is key for educators because it impacts in how students react and behave in the classroom, and suggests that teacher can directly influence how their students behave. It also helps teachers recognize how a student's home environment and lifestyle can influence their conduct, allowing them to look at it objectively and work to improve it. At the end of this discussion, learners will be able to explain the basic principles of behaviorism, determine how to use your words in the learning process more effectively, and discuss the difference of the two behaviorists in learning students' behavior. Welcome to Module 8. First, what is behaviorism? Behaviorism is also known as behavioral psychology. It is a theory of learning which states all behaviors are learned through interaction with the environment through a process called conditioning. It is a systematic approach to understanding the behavior of humans and other animals. It assumes that behavior is either a reflex evoked by the pairing of certain antecedent stimuli in the environment, or a consequence of that individual's history, including especially reinforcement and punishment contingencies, together with the individual's current motivational state and controlling stimuli. It is a doctrine or family of doctrines about how to enthrone behavior not just in the science of psychology, but in the metaphysics of human and animal behavior. This learning theory states that behaviors are learned from the environment and says that innate or inherited factors have a very little influence on behavior. Behaviorist John Watson. Biography and beliefs. John Brodus Watson was born on January 9, 1878 in Greenfield, South Carolina, U.S., and was died on September 25, 1958 in New York, New York. He was known as the father of behaviorism, the first American psychologist to work with Pavlov's ideas, and one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century. His work is standard material in most introductory psychology and educational psychology texts. He is a professor of psychology at Johns Hopkins University. He believed that when born, our mind is tabula rasa, or blank slate. All behavior, no matter how complex, can be reduced to a simple stimulus response. He considered that humans are born with few reflexes and the emotional reactions of love and rage, and that all other behavior is learned through stimulus response associations through conditioning. He believed in the power of conditioning so much that he said if he is given a dozen healthy infants, He can make them into anything you want them to be, basically through making stimulus-response connections through conditioning. Watson's contribution to psychology. Watson's behaviorist theory focused not on the internal emotional and psychological conditions of people, but rather on the external and outward behaviors. In 1928, Watson published Psychological Care of Infant and Child, in which he cautioned against providing children with too much affection and instead endorsed the practice of treating children like miniature adults. Watson's behaviorism has had a long-lasting impact in the nature versus nurture debate, and his work illuminated the strong role early experiences play in shaping personality. Watson and Rayner presented little Albert with a white rat and he showed no fear. Watson then presented the rat with a loud bang that startled little Albert and made him cry. After the continuous association of the white rat and the loud noise, little Albert was classically conditioned to experience fear at the sight of the rat. Albert's fear generalized to other stimuli that were similar to the rat, including a fur coat, some cotton wool, and a Father Christmas mask. The implications of Watson's theory. A behaviorist teacher believes the adage that practice makes perfect and learning is by doing. Students in such a classroom will be given a lot of exercises to practice in and out of the classroom. Students who are not able to achieve high scores will be asked to redo the exercise until they get right. The behaviorist teacher will use repetition as a tool for teaching because of the view that learners imbibe by repeating a task, and that extension will take place if the task learned is not repeated. The law of readiness. This law says that the learner must be prepared mentally and emotionally for learning to take place effectively. Based on the law of effect and the law of operant conditioning, this law states that the feelings of the learner during the learning process are very important, and that the positive reinforcement encourages the learner to repeat a particular behavior. Motivation, both intrinsic and extrinsic, are important for learning to take place. Behaviorist BF Skinner. Biography and Beliefs. Boris Frederick Skinner was born on 20th of March 1904 in Susquehanna, Pennsylvania, United States, and died on 18th of August 1990 in Cambridge, Massachusetts, United States. He was known as the father of operant conditioning and an American psychologist best known for his influence on behaviorism. Defined his philosophy as radical behaviorism and suggested that the concept of free will was simply an illusion, for he believed that all human action was the direct result of conditioning. Skinner came upon the works of Pavlov and Watson while working as a cashier at a bookstore, and it became a turning point in his life and career. Inspired by these books, Skinner gave up his profession as a novelist and enrolled in Harvard University's psychology degree program. He developed what he referred to as an operant conditioning apparatus, which later became known as a Skinner box. The Skinner box device was a chamber that contained a bar or key that an animal could press in order to receive food, water, or some other form of reinforcement. It was designed to teach rats how to push a lever. This behavior is not natural to them, so operant conditioning with positive and negative reinforcement were performed in order to teach the behavior. The positive reinforcement is that a rat was awarded with food when he pressed the lever. Negative reinforcement, on the other hand, a rat was able to turn off electric shocks produced by the floor by pressing the lever. Skinner's work differs from that of the three behaviorists before him in that he studied operant behavior, or the voluntary behaviors used in operating in the environment. Thus, this theory came to be known as operant conditioning. Operant conditioning. Skinner used the term operant to refer to any adaptive behavior that operates upon the environment to generate consequences. His theory explained how we acquire the range of learned behaviors we exhibit every day. His hypothesis was strongly influenced by psychologist Edward Thorndike's work, which postulated the law of effect. This principle states that acts that result in favorable consequences are more likely to be repeated, whereas actions that result in negative outcomes are less likely to be repeated. It is based upon the notion that learning is a result of change in overt behavior. Changes in behavior are the result of an individual's response to events or stimuli that occur in the environment. When a particular stimulus response pattern is reinforced or rewarded, the individual is conditioned to respond. Reinforcement. Reinforcement is the key element in Skinner's stimulus response theory. A reinforcer is anything that strengthens the desired response. There are two types of reinforcer: positive and negative reinforcer. A positive reinforcer is any stimulus that is given or added to increase the response. Example, when a teacher promises to have extra time in the play area to children who behave well during the lesson. Another is a mother who promises a new cell phone for her son who gets good grades. Still, other examples include verbal praises, star stamps in kindergartens, and stickers. On the other hand, a negative reinforcer is any stimulus that results in the increased frequency of a response when it is withdrawn or removed. A negative reinforcer, take note, a negative reinforcer is not a punishment. In fact, it is a reward. For instance, a teacher announces that a student who gets an average grade of 1.5 for the two grading periods will be no longer take the final examination. A negative reinforcer is different from a punishment because a punishment is a consequence intended to result in reduced responses. Punishment is the application of an adverse outcome that decreases or weakens the behavior it follows. There are also two types of punishment: positive punishment and a negative punishment. Positive punishment is presenting a negative reinforced, such as prison, spanking, or scolding, while negative punishment is removing a positive reinforced. For example, is taking away a favorite toy. Examples of operant conditioning. If you fail to hand in a project on time, your boss becomes angry and berates your performance in front of your co-workers. This acts as a positive punisher, making it less likely that you will finish projects late in the future. Second, a professor tells students that if they have perfect attendance all semester, then they do not have to take the final comprehensive exam. By removing an unpleasant stimulus, the final test, students are negatively reinforced to attend class regularly. Reinforcement schedules. Once the desired behavioral response is accomplished, reinforcement does not have to be 100%. In fact, it can be maintained more successfully through what Skinner referred to as partial reinforcement schedules. Partial reinforcement schedules include interval schedules and ratio schedules. First, fixed interval schedules. Fixed interval schedules, the target response is reinforced after a fixed amount of time has passed since the last reinforcement. For example, the bird in a cage is given food. Food is the reinforcer every 10 minutes, regardless of how many times it presses the bar. Second is variable interval schedules. Variable interval schedules, this is similar to fixed interval schedules, but the amount of time that must pass between reinforcement varies. For example, the bird may receive the food different intervals, not every 10 minutes. Third is the fixed ratio schedules. Fixed ratio schedule is a fixed number of correct responses must occur before reinforcement may reoccur. For example, the bird will be given food, which is the reinforcer, every time it presses the bar 5 times. The next one is variable ratio schedules. Variable ratio schedules the number of correct repetitions of a correct response for reinforcement varies. For example, the bird is given food, which is the reinforcer, after it presses times, then after 10 times, then after 4 times. So the bird able to predict how many times it pressed the bar before it gets food again. Variable interval and especially variable ratio schedules produce steadier and more persistent rates of response because the learners cannot predict when the reinforcement will come, although they know that they will eventually succeed. An example of this is why people continue to buy lotto tickets even when an almost negligible percentage of people actually win. While it is true that very rarely is there a big winner, but once in a while somebody hits the jackpot, which is the reinforcement. People cannot predict when the jackpot can be gotten, and that is a variable interval. So they continue to buy tickets, and that is repetition of response. The implications of operant conditioning. Practice should take the form of question with stimulus, answer as a response, frames which expose the student to the subject in gradual stages. Require that the learner makes a response for every frame and receives immediate feedback. Try to arrange the difficulty of questions so the response is always correct and hence a positive reinforcement. Ensure that good performance in the lesson is paired with secondary reinforcers such as verbal praise, prizes, and good grades. There are principles that we can get from Skinner's operant conditioning, and these are the following. Behavior that is positively reinforced will reoccur. Intermittent reinforcement is particularly effective. Second, information should be presented in small amounts so that responses can be reinforced. Third, reinforcements will generalize across similar stimuli or the stimulus generalization, producing secondary conditioning. Before I end the session, let me leave you this quote from BF Skinner. A failure is not always a mistake. It may simply be the best one can do under the circumstances. The mistake is to stop trying. Thank you, stay safe, and God bless everyone.